Well, good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson tonight. President Trump announced this afternoon that the United States will be pulling out of the Paris Agreement. That's an international agreement intended to combat global warming by reducing greenhouse gas emissions.
The United States will withdraw from the Paris Climate Accord. We're getting out. I was elected to represent the citizens of Pittsburgh, not Paris.
Wow, that did it. The left immediately became hysterical, even more than usual. Keep in mind that this was a non-binding, unenforceable agreement whose effects, even if every nation involved followed the agreement to the letter, cannot be known with any precision. It doesn't matter. The world just ended, literally, as they say. Billionaire Democratic donor Tom Steyer described Trump's decision as, quote, assault and battery on the future of the American people. CNN warned its viewers to expect mass extinctions, flooding in the streets of New York City, the physical annihilation of the Marshall Islands. The ACLU, meanwhile, somehow concluded that leaving the agreement was, and this is a quote, a massive step back for racial justice and an assault on communities of color. Didn't explain how. And then there was cable news. My gosh, the long faces, the grave intonations, the florid and outraged proclamations. It was like somebody died, millions of them, actually.
On a sunny day in the Rose Garden, what could be defined and construed as a dark speech.
This will be the day that the United States resigned as the leader of the free world.
I have such rage and sadness. We just watched a dangerous little man give a very, very scary speech.
One of the most bleak depictions of America's role in the world as environmental partners.
So he is not helping the forgotten American. He is hurting them. Their kids will have worse asthma in the summer. The president who talked about putting America first has now put America last.
Well, we're no longer obviously talking about science here. What you're watching is a priesthood defending its faith. The essence of science, meanwhile, is skepticism that's relentlessly testing what you think you know to make certain you actually know it. The people who ran the space program didn't know everything, and they knew it. That's not happening here. It's not allowed. Press for explanations as to what they're talking about, and you're attacked as immoral, a denier. The matter is settled. Every word immutable and holy. Questions equal apostasy. Shut up and believe. The irony is that almost none of the religious figures you saw sermonizing on television today actually know much about the Paris Agreement beyond the bullet points they've been handed by their producers 10 minutes before. What's in it? Do they have any idea? And if so, why haven't they told us till now? Before today, most of the people you just saw spent far more time yammering about Clockboy and transgender bathrooms than about climate accords. So what is in the agreement? Well, there are a lot of things in the agreement, and a few of them are worth knowing. First, if the U.S. were to stick with this accord, we'd be pledging to cut our greenhouse gas production by at least 26% below the levels it was in 2005. That's a big reduction, and it's not expected of China, India, or other huge polluting countries who, by the way, happen to be our chief economic rivals. Under the Paris Agreement, rich nations like the United States agree to send $100 billion to poorer countries every year starting in 2020 to aid with their transition to green energy. President Obama pledged $3 billion to this fund. China, meanwhile, has not pledged a cent, the world's biggest polluter. In fact, China is likely to receive some of this money. Keep in mind the Chinese economy is predicted to overtake our economy in less than a year from right now, but somehow we ought to subsidize their energy production? That is lunacy. It's masochism. We've already guessed how we're supposed to pay for all of this, higher energy costs here. Americans would pay more for gas, more for electricity, more in taxes, all in the name of meeting obligations that other countries don't have to meet. If you want to know how all of this might end, look across the Atlantic. European electricity, and some people actually care what it costs, there costs 3 times as much as it does here, and the prices are rising faster there as well. Despite all of this, even supporters of the agreement concede, the ones who actually know what's in it, there aren't many, that it won't come close to stopping global warming even if everyone abided by the terms. Now, there are counter-arguments to this, of course, in favor of the treaty. There always are, and some of them are legitimate. That's the point. This is a debate. It's a big deal. A lot is at stake for Americans who, by and large, know nothing of the details. Shouldn't Congress have a chance to debate this and vote on it like they're supposed to? Actually, they already had that chance. It came in 2009. President Obama had a Democratic House and a Senate supermajority that year. The people now telling you that global warming is an existential threat to the world, that everyone will die if we don't get a handle on it, had more power at that moment than at any time since the New Deal in the 30s. And they could have done something about global warming, openly and democratically. Did they? No. They focused on passing the stimulus package, Obamacare, Dodd-Frank. Well, since that year, American voters have consistently elected majorities for whom global warming is not a priority. Because outside of affluent pockets and a relatively small number of zip codes, global warming itself is not a top priority for the American public, not even close. Maybe it should be, but it's not. And that's how democracy works. The public gets to decide what is most important. Now, the people in charge disagree with it. They don't care what voters think. They lost interest in democracy a long time ago, and they're no longer hiding that fact. They don't believe you should be consulted before they change your life forever, and mostly they don't bother to consult you. Except today, for once they didn't get their way, and of course they're hysterical about it. Maybe now they'll have to make a real argument on behalf of what they believe before imposing it by force on you. And that's the way the system is supposed to work. Philip Levine is part of the system. He is a former Hillary Clinton surrogate. He's the mayor of Palm Beach, and he joins us tonight. Mr. Mayor, thanks for coming on.
Thank you. Miami Beach, Tucker.
Miami Beach. Oh, did I say Palm Beach?
You said Palm Beach, and I love Palm Beach, but Miami Beach is where it's at.
I have Mar-a-Lago on the mind. Excuse me. So,
you mean that new water park in the future?
So, look, you're concerned about rising sea levels. I'm not here to argue that's not a concern. Or the details of climate science, because I'm agnostic about it. I'm just wondering how this specific agreement, sending $3 billion a year to countries like India and China, who don't have to lower their emissions rates, is going to fix the global warming problem in Miami Beach.
Tucker, let me tell you what's going on in Miami Beach. When I became mayor, we have streets that are flooding during sunny days. The water levels have gone up dramatically. We, of course, moved forward to raise our roads, put in pumps, change our building codes. And it's not because we're so excited to have to do that, but we have to do it for survival of our city. And it's not just Miami Beach. It's coastal cities all over the world.
Okay.
Hey, Tucker, I heard what you had to say, but I got to tell you something. When the world's leading scientists are telling you this is what's going on, I mean, and some of the smartest minds in the world are telling you this is the reason why, at some point you have to listen.
Yeah, you're actually dodging my question completely, and I'm not denying the existence of sea level rise. I'm merely asking a very specific policy question, because this is about policies. How will the terms of the Paris Agreement, specifically handing $3 billion a year to India and China, which do not have to lower their emissions in the rest of this generation, how will that help what's going on in Miami Beach, the things you just described?
Tucker, the bottom line is, as the world is getting too hot and too warm, the oceans are rising, and that's affecting Miami Beach, and it's affecting all coastal cities. We must cool the globe down.
I can't let you dodge it again, okay? Because at the end, specifics make the difference. It is dodging, and I'm asking you about a very specific agreement that you and everyone else on the left is beating their chests about, and Trump is destroying the world. Okay, fine, I'm open-minded. Tell me how that specific agreement and the financial arrangements in it will help the problems you describe.
And I'm going to tell you why. First of all, I'm not the guy from the left, and the one thing I can tell you is this. I'm in that radical center. I call myself a radical centrist. And the bottom line is rising oceans aren't Republican and they're not Democrat. So what does an agreement do? An agreement puts the world together in an alignment, and says, we have a problem. Let's work together and solve the problem. I mean, Tucker, let's just say for the slight chance, what about for the slight chance, Tucker, all the world scientists and some of these great minds, let's just say maybe they're right. If they are, maybe it's a good idea if we do something about it.
So what you're saying is you're not bothering. Hold on. What you're saying, you're describing religious faith. You're saying, I don't have to bother to learn any of the details about a very specific agreement that we're all mad about today, because there are people whose names I don't know who think it's a good idea. And my question to you is, why wouldn't the average person say, hey, I'm open-minded, but, like, why don't you give me some specifics and tell me more, win me over, don't force me to participate, explain it to me. It's a democracy after all, right? Isn't it?
No question it's a democracy. And you know what? It's an American democracy. And truthfully, it's a world democracy. And as you can imagine, we used to be the leader in that free world democracy. And I think really today, I got to tell you, what Fareed Zakaria said, and I heard you say, it's kind of right. We gave up leadership.
Man, I thought you guys believed in science. Why don't you give me some, why don't you tell me why allowing China to take a pass on reducing its greenhouse emissions for years is going to reduce global warming and its effects? I don't understand. What's the answer?
But the fact of the matter is, think about it, Tucker. China signed this agreement. Europe signed it. India signed it. Everyone's in it together to make the globe a better place, to reduce these emissions. And, I mean, come on. You're talking about going through...
Is there a single person watching this show stupid enough to be convinced by what you are saying? I'm open-minded. I want you to convince me that the Paris Agreement is a good, thing, will reduce global warming, and you're not even trying.
Almost every mayor in America now has come together and say we're going to adhere to those protocols.
Is that really your argument?
No question.
Like other people are doing it, therefore it's a good idea?
And we know, Tucker. Come on.
Large groups of people have been in favor of some really crazy things over the years. Don't you owe your constituents, the public, the obligation of explaining in clear, simple terms specifically how the terms of this agreement will achieve the goal
Tucker,
you say they will?
The terms are very clear. If you all come together and you reduce your greenhouse emissions and you lower the temperature of the world, that the waters will stop rising. That is a global agreement.
But that's not what this agreement says. No, but that's not what it says.
Of course it does, Tucker.
But why does
it goes?
But it actually doesn't. And I sense I know more about it perhaps than you do. But just last question. You may be totally right, and I'm not denying that you are, because I'm not a denier. But if that's true, if reducing emissions will prevent the seas from rising, then why not require India and China and the world's other biggest polluters to do that? This agreement doesn't do that.
And I believe the fact that Tucker, it does. It brings everybody together. But one thing I learned with the president's comments today, what he said about Pittsburgh, it's funny because the mayor of Pittsburgh is a friend of mine who doesn't agree with this, but what's incredible, I didn't realize that Ohio and Pittsburgh doesn't get affected by climate change. To me, it was an interesting thing. I just learned it.
You're making me more nervous than I was when this segment began. But, Mr. Mayor, I appreciate your coming on. It was game of you.
Thank you, Tucker.